So the topic is how to model a healthy relationship with politics during the election. And this is something that is I'm very passionate about. It is the motivation for the Pour Over. So the Pour Over is a newsletter. It comes out 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We summarize the biggest, most visible news of the day in a politically neutral way, and then pair it with brief biblical reminders. So I talk about politics all the time. We summarize politics. We're in it. We get replies from people who have different political views. And really, the Pour Over was born out of my personal, very bad relationship with politics. And me saying, like, man, this just isn't working. I want to do something different. So my bad relationship with politics was completely my fault. In 2018, starting in high school and through undergrad, I had started paying a little bit more attention. And in 2018, I was like, I'm in grad school. I should be an adult. I should know what's going on in the world, be a little bit more thoughtful. And so I jumped in the deep end, and I spent weeks consuming only Fox News, and then I spent weeks consuming only CNN. And I just wanted to experience it and start saying, hey, I'm an adult and I'm going to know what's going on. This proved to be a bad spiritual exercise for me, as you might imagine. And I was struck, not obviously, and I knew the different ideological differences between these organizations, but I was struck somewhat by the very similar tactics and methods both used, and I feel like that was a lot of what caused the spiritual damage to me. Both sides have news constantly, just 24/7. There's always another article, always another show. Both sides make all news out to be all important. Like everything that they're reporting on is super urgent, important, paramount. And then the third thing that struck me was that both sides spend an enormous amount of time just talking about how stupid the other side is. It's not even really news, but it's a lot of their programming is how incredulous. If you're looking at these things, how could you possibly come to any conclusion other than what I have? So after my experiment of one and then the other, I started consuming both and some other news sources, some Christian sources. First I should say, there were lots of nodding heads. Everyone knows these things are true about the news. And I knew that they were true. What I was surprised by was how effective they were and how I quickly saw my views it took weeks, but in a matter of weeks, when I was only consuming Fox, I started to care about what Fox cared about. I started to be angry at what Fox was angry about. And then when I switched to CNN, it took some time, but I started to see, wow, I care about what CNN cares about. I'm angry at who CNN is angry about. So then I started consuming both. And it felt more intellectually honest, I will say, but it didn't solve any of those 3 issues. I was still consuming a lot of news about things that were presented as more important than they were. The main difference was that I now thought everyone was stupid because I was consuming both sides. So it was at this moment also that I was like, hey, I should evaluate this experiment that I put myself in. And one of the things that I realized was spiritually, over these past weeks, I had started to see a lot of the opposite of the fruit of the Spirit in me. So this was my assessment that this was a spiritually damaging exercise for me. In Galatians, the Apostle Paul says the fruit of the Spirit, so you can tell a tree by its fruit. The fruit of the Spirit is what is produced when God's Spirit is present. It is the evidence. It's what God tastes and smells and looks like. And it is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. My experience was that the news did not produce in me love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. I actually, for the first time in my life, was starting to kind of hate people. Now, bad people that I was supposed to hate, right? But there was at least the seeds of hatred there. Joy, I wasn't feeling much joy. I was feeling a lot of fear. peace. I would say anxiety was more prevalent than peace. And you go through gentleness. The news was not making me a more gentle person by any means. So my relationship with politics, because of my relationship with the news, was in a pretty unhealthy place. I happened at this time to go to dinner with Nate Wells, who's still my best friend, and we went to Who Hot. Does anyone know what Who Hot is? Okay, it's kind of like a cheap Mongolian grill. It's a chain, and at least the location in Iowa City in 2018 had a deal on Tuesdays where they would let you eat your body weight in dimly lit mystery meat for like $12. So Nate and I loved this deal, thought it was great. Neither of our new brides appreciated the value of Who Hot, so Nate and I would go together, and in between rounds of what was hopefully Mongolian beef, I was talking to him about my relationship with the news and this frustration where it's like, man, I still feel like the news is important and politics is important and I should be aware of what's going on, but I have tried paying attention and it's not doing good things to me. So what am I supposed to do? Is it just shut out politics, shut out the news because my relationship with Christ is more important, and can I not have both? But in Who Hot, I committed to him to trying to be more intentional and solve this problem I had. So I said, hey, I'm going to send you an email, and it's going to just be about what happened that week in the news, and then I'm going to pair it with some reminder to focus on Christ, to focus on eternity, to love your enemies, something like that. And that is what is now the pour over. So I sent it to him, and I was telling someone last night, the first email, he laughed at something I wrote, and it was like, oh, that was a reluctant laugh. He didn't want to like what I had sent, And it's like, maybe other people could enjoy this. And so I took a little step and was like, hey, I'm gonna share this with more people. So that is how the pour over started. And fast forward to 2023, so 5 years later, most of this time the pour over was a personal exercise. Nate and my aunts and uncles were reading it, but then it started to grow. And by 2023, we had 250,000 subscribers. I had gone full time, and my relationship with politics was just night and day. So that was what we started talking about in 2023, is I think the pour over and consuming the news, we're proud of the products that we produce. It's as politically neutral as we can make it. It points you towards Christ. But I had experienced a transformation in my personal life politically that the pour over alone was not going to create in people. And so we started saying, hey, what are those things? What are those principles? What happened to Jason to transform him, and how can we help other people go through that? So that is what I'm doing today, is we've worked to say, hey, what are biblical boundaries and principles that you can set with the news so that you can have a spiritually healthy relationship with the news and politics? And we came up with 6 general things to say, hey, these are the 6 categories where if you focus your effort here, you'll yield some results. And so I'm just going to go through each of those 6 things here today. The first is your time in the news, how much time you spend in the news. And taking even a baby step back is figuring out why you consume the news. So any brave souls want to answer just what are some reasons that people consume the news? Why even follow it as a Christian? Why should you turn on the news?
You need to be aware of what's going on.
Aware of what's going on? To what end?
People around the world, it affects everyone's lives.
Yeah. So we have asked this question primarily through email to thousands of people now, and got a lot of answers. Some of them are good, and I have kind of 2 categories of answers that I feel like are good that these fit into. There are also a lot of, in my opinion, bad answers of or people that have no idea why. And it's just like, well, I follow the news because I follow the news. And so the answers that are compelling to me kind of fall into one of two categories. The first is to be aware of things that impact me or you, the person reading it. If there's a hurricane heading your way, that's good info to have. And I would also put into this category, hey, if you're going to vote for someone, then being aware of who it is you're voting for, that's a good thing. It's less directly impactful than a hurricane heading your way, but it might feel like a hurricane heading your way, figuring out who to vote for. So that's the first category.
Hey friends, if you've been walking with us here on this Rooted podcast, you already know our heart. Bible-saturated, gospel-centered ministry rooted in deep relationships. So we want to make sure you know about something that's at the very core of what we do, the Rooted Conference. Every fall, we gather youth, children, and family ministry leaders from around the country for a time of encouragement, equipping, and connection. It's just the gospel, great teaching, and real conversations with people who get what it's like to be in the trenches of next-gen ministry. This year, we're diving into the church in the book of Acts, and we'll explore how the early church speaks to the pressures facing today's teenagers and families, especially the weight of radical individualism. We'll be in Chicago October 23rd through 25th, and we would love to see you there. So whether you're a longtime part of the Rooted family or just starting the journey, come join us. Let's learn together and walk forward in hope for the next generation. Register today at rootedministry.com.
The second is to discuss the news and interact with other people in a way that glorifies God. So people talk about the news. This morning, I went to bed before the World Series game ended. If you haven't heard, it was very dramatic and exciting. And people were talking about this exciting game this morning. People were talking about the election with me this morning. Your coworkers, your friends, they talk about things that are in the news. And so having Christians that are aware of what's going on and engaging in that in a way that is glorifying to God feels like a worthy reason to be aware of what's going on. Now, I want to suggest that both those things can be accomplished in like 5 to 15 minutes a day. It just doesn't, you don't need 2 hours of news, or you don't need to be scrolling through Instagram or TikTok or watching hour-long segments every night to be aware of what is happening in the world enough to engage and to hear that a hurricane is headed your way. Honestly, if you don't have the news, you will still find out if a hurricane is headed your way. And I think people that advocate for much more than 5 to 15 minutes per day are not appropriately weighing the negative effects that too much news can have. For me, the cost benefit of more news just drops off after that amount of time. I have consumed too much news, and I felt miserable. And I was drawn further away from God because I was being discipled and consuming too much news. So we want to consume as little news as possible to get the benefit and recognize that more news is not better. And more news does not, being more informed about things that you're not actually going to do anything about is not a virtue, even though being informed feels virtuous. It in and of itself is not. So my first homework assignment for all of you with this is to just track how much news you're consuming in a week. And yeah, get a gut check for where that's at. The second category is time, how much time you spend with God. One of the reasons that I consumed a lot of news when I consumed a lot of news was because, and like, hey, I want to consume more, was because I wanted to have a Christian worldview, and I wanted to be a mature adult Christian that like knew what was going on and had proper, appropriate stances on things. And in my view, the most Christian worldview, or the people that had the most Christian worldview, were people that had Christian stances and opinions on the most world things, the most news. I now think that that's wrong. The people who have the most Christ-like Christian worldview are just the people that know Jesus best. It's not, of the two, Christ and world, you gotta skew a lot more heavily towards Christ. And So our pursuit and goal should be to just know Jesus better, and then the people who know Jesus really well will have that impact every area of their life, including, almost by accident, the news that they're hearing. And so if you don't have an opinion or don't know what the Christian stance on something is and want to know, go seek out someone who knows Jesus better than you and talk through this event. Don't go find someone who knows the event or the news really well and maybe says they're a Christian, but you don't know their walk particularly well. And yet that's what we do. We go, it's like, I need to learn more about this policy or whatever. I'm going to go to the news and then be discipled by the news. So, second piece of homework is to track how much time you spend with God and be very inclusive in this. You go to church, track it. You listen to a Christian podcast, yes, prayer, Bible, non-Christian or non-fiction Christian book, count it. Figure out how much time you are being discipled and around and steeped in Jesus as opposed to in the news, which is cropping up everywhere. When we started the Pour Over and no one read it, the thing that I was doing was summarizing the news and then trying to provide something insightful and biblical that was fresh each time. And I quickly realized that I am not talented or wise enough to do this, to come up with new, wise biblical insight multiple times a week. And also, I didn't need that. My unhealthy relationship with politics wasn't manifesting in new ways. I was getting the same things wrong over and over and over. And so the next four principles, things that we see the most impact from, are the four things that the Pour Over reinforces. Our Christian perspectives are pre-written with no specific story in mind, and they're hitting on one of these four categories that I personally just need to be reminded of when I'm reading the news. So the first is to focus on eternity. I have gone long stretches in my adult life without thinking about heaven. And truthfully, for most of my life, my view of heaven was much more influenced by cartoon drawings of clouds and gates than it was actually thinking about what eternity will be like. But I now find this as like almost a cheat code for peace when consuming the news. Imagine how you will view this event in 10,000 years. All of us are going to live forever. We will be in heaven 10,000 years from now. Will this thing matter? Should it be consuming my time and energy? And when I go through this exercise, a few things happen. One, big things like elections just start to feel less big. Like imagine talking with someone in heaven about the 2024 election that's happening a little bit. They reasonably do not know what the United States is, didn't live around there. They may not know what democracy is. The concept of voting may be kind of a novel idea to them. And you zoom out and you're like, wow, this is just one leader of one country at one point in time. And from God's perspective, it's a little bit less consequential than it feels right now, you know? So the big things feel less big. Also, the scary things feel less scary. Let's say the wrong candidate wins. Let's say we get invaded. Let's say any bad thing happens. Be selfish for a minute. You're going to be okay. We know how this ends. And we can't let this make us callous towards things, and we talk about that later. But it should be a confidence that you will be okay, and no matter what happens, your job is to serve through the chaos. There will be chaos. It will be bad, you know? So, but you're going to be okay. You don't need to be truly scared because, hey, even if the next 80 years are real bad, the next eternity is real good. So have a little bit of confidence that we don't need to be running scared. We need to be serving through the chaos. And then the other thing is sad things often become more urgent and important. It's just that the world has the priorities all wrong. And someone in my life close to me that's hurting or suffering or being overlooked or oppressed or whatever it is, you think about that in 10,000 years, and it's like, oh gosh, I do not want to see them in heaven and have the conversation be that I just ignored them and did my own thing, or that I was focused on the election. It's like, I want that to be a joyous reunion of me serving and welcoming their help and loving and caring for these real human beings, as opposed to focused on the big things like the stock market. So I, in short, had not realized how much of my news anxiety was coming from my heaven avoidance or not thinking about heaven. And so the advice, homework in this area is to, before you read the news each day, take 30 seconds and pray that God would help you see the news you're about to read from his perspective, from an eternal light. Or alternatively, just take 30 seconds and think about heaven. Think about 5,000 years from now, 10,000 years from now, so that you are rooted in the fact that you are first and foremost a citizen of heaven who happens to be in America in this day and age.
Rooted Ministry is excited to partner with PNR Publishing to announce our newest book, Body Image, Valuing God's Good Gift by Andrea Lee, written specifically for young women. This book is part of the 31 Day Devotionals for Teenagers series, which includes titles for both boys and girls. In our sin-torn world, even God's good gifts, like our bodies, come with major challenges. Whether teenage girls are struggling with shame, wrestling with questions about diet and exercise, or simply wondering what it means to live a God-honoring life in a female body, the Bible is filled with beautiful truth to help and encourage them. Andrea Lee writes as one who understands the pain of body image struggles. With warmth and transparency, she points young women to the deep hope of the gospel. 2-page devotional readings, accompanied by prayers and reflection questions, will help students appreciate God's amazing design for their bodies as part of his good creation.
That's the first category, perspective, that we reinforce. The second thing that I found I need frequent reminders of is to be humble and open to correction. We defend what we love and feels core to our identity. So I am not going to defend and don't take offense if someone insults a keto diet. I'm not totally sure what a keto diet is. I think it's a lot of meat or protein or something, but it's not core to my identity. But I betcha if I walked outside and started ragging on Texas, someone would attack me with a giant flag. Like, people care about Texas. They find some of their identity in being Texan. I had a kind of identity-shaking moment when I realized that I felt a stronger, more urgent need to defend and evangelize who I was voting for than Jesus. I was willing to talk about Jesus. I was a Christian. My dad's pastor. I've never rebelled from the faith. But I was willing to talk about Jesus, but I was eager to talk about politics and who my political candidate was or what my political party was going to do. So what I have found to be most helpful in this area is just to apologize. So I would challenge people in this room to apologize verbally, out loud, with your mouth to another human being, maybe in front of the kids that you pastor or parent, something news related. Show that you are open to correction, that you are a work in progress, that you aren't doing this well. And so apologize for caring too much about the news, for speaking about someone in the news poorly, for checking the news in the middle of a conversation. It doesn't need to be big, but it unravels something in your heart and forces you to let go a little bit, and that you aren't perfect, and that maybe your political views and the way you've handled everything hasn't been excellent. And it also models that to other people. The third thing is to love your enemy. Now, growing up, I did not have a list of enemies, and poets will attest that love is kind of a hard to pin down term. So growing up, I knew that Jesus told me to love my enemies. I just didn't really know what this meant. Like I remember praying and thinking good thoughts for Kim Jong-un and Osama bin Laden. I don't know, Jesus told me so. I'm trying to love my enemy, but it wasn't very real. But it became real to me when I made it more personal and specific. Jesus wants us to love our political enemy. Now, someone specific doesn't necessarily come to mind. Maybe they do, but you know the type of person that would fall into the category of your political enemy. They vote the wrong way passionately. They malign or belittle your views. That is the person that we are called to love. Now, this is where it's about to get really uncomfortable. 1 Corinthians 13, Paul, which is not just for newlyweds, Paul says, love is patient, love is kind. Love does not envy, it is not boastful, it is not arrogant, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not irritable, and it does not keep a record of wrongs. Imagine if that is how you treated your political enemies or the politician that you dislike. I can kind of get on board with speaking kindly about them. That feels like the right thing to do. Honestly, it feels like the wrong, irresponsible thing to do to not keep a record of their wrongs. It feels like a wrong, irresponsible, bad civic duty to not be irritated by politicians or people that view politics differently than you, who vote differently than you. And that discomfort feels like the shock and awe that pastors tell me I should feel when I see that Jesus told me to love my enemy. I don't feel like they're my enemy, but when I think about being patient and kind and unirritated and not boasting when my team wins and not being arrogant when my team wins and not envying their power or when the other side wins, that feels radical. And that is not how we treat our political enemies. So your homework in this category is, after consuming the news, to pray and to specifically confess anger that you feel towards people in the news. These kind of larger-than-life people that you don't know, but are maybe tolerating building up anger and hatred towards. The fourth and final thing that we need reminding of is to take action and to actually respond and do things to the news. So when you hear about a natural disaster, do you go volunteer and help with the cleanup? When you hear about layoffs, do you help people find jobs? When you hear about bad things happening in Congress, do you run for office? I have not done any of those things. And I actually think that's okay. Every day, there are endless things in the news. There is always something going wrong, always something that you can and theoretically should be doing. And if you feel this burden to respond to everything, you end up feeling helpless and hopeless and guilty. So here's what I'm going to say, because we cannot, you just cannot do everything. And if you are helping in Gaza or Israel, that means you're not helping at the southern border, or you're not creating medicine, or you're not running for office. And so what are you supposed to do? What we suggest is just do something. And by that, I mean two things. The first is find one thing that God has laid on your heart that you are going to consistently work towards. Maybe it is the thing that drives your vote. Like it's this thing that you are passionate about and you say, I vote this way because of this issue, but you don't do anything else about it other than vote. That is something that God has laid on your heart. Go do more. Be consistent and act act on that thing. Also, by do something, I mean, when other things come up that are not your one thing that you're working towards, if the Holy Spirit stirs, do something small, respond to that, donate, maybe go volunteer for a day, do something, but then go back to the good work that you're doing. So let me give you an example. I see an issue in America with how people relate to politics in the news. It is something that, for whatever reason, God has laid on my heart, and I get more passionate about than other people. And so I have spent a lot of time, and for a long time, it was just volunteer work of working through this thing in myself and then trying to help other people do it. And it is a good work that I'm passionate at and feel fulfillment in doing. When something else comes up, I have to forcibly allow myself to not get distracted from this good work I'm doing. I think about, I can't remember the verse, but it's in Nehemiah. Nehemiah is up on the wall, and good people are trying to get him to come down doing for good things, and he says, I'm doing a good work. I'm up on the wall. I got to rebuild this wall. I'm doing a good work. I'm not going to be distracted by these other things. You got to find your one thing that you feel solid in, where you can say, no, I'm not going to do those other good things. I'm building the wall. I'm doing a good work. But also be open to the Holy Spirit to saying, man, if something else really breaks your heart, to respond to that and be open to changing what your good work is. Just be very slow to change what your good work is. We are called to care for orphans and widows and the poor, and there's all sorts of things that we are supposed to do. But you individually are not supposed to do all those things for every person. That is a call for the collective body of Christ. So the church needs to be caring for orphans and widows. You do not need to be caring for every single orphan and widow. And we need to have a good work where we have our role in the kingdom of God, and we are advancing the kingdom through this thing that God has given us talents and a passion for, and trust in the larger body to be advancing the entire work of the kingdom. And when something else stirs, support them, but don't be drawn away from the good work that you're doing. If I would say this room all has their good work. Like if you're in this room and it is an option. My wife's good work right now is parenting. She's raising our daughters. That is a good work, and that should be what she focuses on. But that is for a season, and at some point, she will need to find a new good work to focus on.